I'm out here doing the service on the Suzuki, and man, what a breath of fresh air this is after working on that Can-Am piece of shit that we've bought. This thing right here is just so nice. I mean, the skid plate came off super easy with 4 little screws, and then we pulled the drain plug, draining out the rear differential right now. The fill plug is super easy to get to. The oil filter, the spin-on engine oil filter up front was piece of cake to get to. Didn't have to move any plastics or anything. I mean, this is just a real joy to do maintenance on. So at least the Suzuki's going to be done and ready to go here in another 5 minutes, and then we'll go over here and try to start working on this Can-Am and get it ready. I got to put the full brake system on it and bleed the brakes back out and then try to do service on it. Really not looking forward to it, but it's nice to have one good machine in the bunch. Alright, so we finally got the brakes back together on this thing. We ended up having to do the rear also because they were just about chewed completely up, just like the fronts. We caught these just in time because the brake pads were completely gone and there was nothing left, but it hadn't started to eat into the rotor back here yet. So a $40 set of brake pads and we're good to go back here. We got the fronts done, and now he's just taking a heat gun and trying to get some of the damage out of the plastics up there. And we'll be ready for a test ride, and hopefully it's good to go so we can head out on spring break next week. And here's what was left of the brake pads at 700 miles. Like I said, I've never seen anything like this before. This one is totally gone. I mean, there's just nothing left of that one. You can see where the piston and the caliper was eating into this one. And then this was from the, I guess the, what you would call the passenger side, or the driver's side, the left-hand side. That's where this one came from. And it was not as bad, but you can see, I mean, there's nothing left of them. Just really wild stuff. I've never seen anything like this in such a short amount of time. Now here's the other thing that we thought was kind of weird. If you look at these pads, you'll notice that one side has this curved piece here fabricated onto it, and there's a pin that goes through there. So when the pin is in place, the pad can't really move either direction. The pin locates it and holds it, right? But the other pad doesn't have that. It's just got a flat surface here. And this allowed it to jump out and move around like that. And that kind of made the carnage a lot worse because there wasn't anything to locate this pad. And the new ones we got from the dealership looked exactly the same way. They didn't have this made onto that other pad. So I don't know, it's a strange setup for sure, but I guess from now on, like every 3 or 4 months, we're gonna have to take all the wheels off and check the pads on this thing just to make sure it doesn't happen again, because this could get really expensive. All right, so we finally got the Can-Am back together again. Surely this thing can make it through 2 or 3 days of camping and riding, can't it? At this point, it's got all new brakes all the way around, new tires. The radiator has been relocated so that it doesn't persistently overheat and go into limp mode all the time when we're just trying to ride normal trails. It's got fresh fluids in it, except for the rear diff housing. Haven't figured that one out yet, but it's got fresh engine oil, fresh oil filter. The front diff has been done. I had to cut the threads again and put a new bolt in there because it's at a weird angle and it's stripped out. But I got that done. So this thing should be ready to go. We filled it up with fuel and hopefully it can make it through at least 2 or 3 days. So Now we're just loading up the little camper trailer here. We got the Suzuki in here already, and our mattresses and generator, little microwave oven, and you know, just some stuff that we're going to use for the next few days to camp with. So should be a fun trip. So the other thing that's going to be really interesting on this trip is to see how this Hemi V8 can tow, you know, our typical load here that we always tow around. You know, how does it do compared to the EcoDiesel? You know, you remember a couple years ago I had the exact same truck, 5th gen Ram 1500 crew cab 4x4, same truck, but it had the 3rd generation EcoDiesel engine in it. And then of course later on I had that Jeep Gladiator that also had the EcoDiesel in it. So as far as towing an enclosed trailer like this, loaded up with ATVs and camping gear, we're going to have stuff in the bed of the truck too, like coolers and water and stuff like that. You know, as far as towing this kind of a load around, which is pretty typical for a half-ton truck, you know, I've been doing it with the EcoDiesel engine for the last 2 or 3 years. So this year, we've got the Hemi gas V8, and it'll be pretty interesting, I think, to see how it does in comparison to the EcoDiesel. You know, everybody thinks the EcoDiesel is just so fuel efficient, but the truth is it's not. You know, it would get around 10 miles per gallon towing something like this. So I figure that the Hemi is probably going to end up, well, I've got the larger tires on it, but of course I had larger tires on the EcoDiesel too, so it's kind of apples to apples there. But I figure the Hemi should do 9 to 10 miles per gallon. It should be able to do the same. And we're going to be putting less expensive fuel in it. So it may actually save me money on this trip compared to doing this same thing with the diesel. We'll see. You know, and then obviously the other part of the equation is just how does it perform? You know, can it pull this trailer up those hills on the interstate here in Kentucky without downshifting all the way to like 2nd or 3rd gear? You know, can we stay in, say, 4th or 5th gear going up the hills like the EcoDiesel did? I mean, I think it can, but there's only one way to find out, right? So one thing I did do is I put the Timbren suspension enhancement system back on this truck. You know, I had it on the other Ram and then I used it on the Jeep. Well, when I traded those off, I kept that and I put it back on this truck. If you don't know what that is, just look it up on the web. Timbren SES. It's basically just some rubber overload springs or helper springs, you know, that prevent the truck from sagging. Anyway, I got those on there. And I think I'm going to try and just run with those instead of putting the bars on the hitch. But I am going to take the weight distribution bars with me. Got them in the trailer here, and I'm going to take them with me. So if I do end up getting quite a bit of sway, I can always just throw them on. But I think it's going to be fine. Once we get all loaded up here, I'm going to put some weight back there too and try to even it out. I think it'll be fine, but at least I'm prepared in case I do need them. So as far as what kind of weight we're going to be pulling here, you can see that the GVWR on this trailer is 9950 and the payload is 6162. So that means the trailer itself should weigh about 3788. Now I don't know exactly how much all of this gear weighs. I haven't weighed it specifically, and I still got a little bit more to put in here. But let's just say all this stuff goes a couple 100 pounds, you know? So let's say that we're at about 4,000 pounds. And then the ATVs combined are about 1,500 pounds. So that puts us at about 5,500. So, you know, once I get everything loaded up in here and I'm finished, the total weight of the trailer and the cargo should be just under 6,000 pounds. Before we set out, I got one little project I have to do on the Ram here, and that is that the sway bar links, the factory ones, completely wore out on me. I guess they didn't appreciate having that leveling kit on there. So actually this part of the joint gave out on me, and if I grab it with 2 hands, I can actually walk it back and forth. So that joint on the inside there has failed completely. So I bought some of these from Suspension Max, and you can see how they're set up. They've actually got some proper angles built into them, and there's a little bit of adjustment there. They have bushings, so the way this is set up will prevent any noise and rattling These are getting to the point where they just sounded absolutely terrible. I mean, it sounded like the front end of the truck was falling apart. So this ought to cure the problem. One thing I'll note is that on my particular truck, the bottom link had an 18 millimeter nut and the top had a 21 millimeter nut on it. So you're going to need a couple of different pieces of tools. I ended up having to use an air gun to get these off because there's no way to get a ratchet on there and keep it from spinning. There's got a little provision down here. You can put like a set of channel locks or something on to hold it, but you just can't really get a wrench up in there because of the way the lower A-arm is designed. So it was a lot easier just to use air tools. Now on this new one, both the top and the bottom should be 19 millimeter. So that makes it a little bit handier if you ever got to take them off in the future. You just need one size to get them completely off. But yeah, I'm gonna get up under here and put these bad boys on, and that should take care of all the noise, and hopefully it'll get the sway bar leveled back out to where it should be to compensate for the 2-inch lift also. Do a little update here on how the truck is doing so you can see the temperatures there. The oil temperature's running over 250 degrees. Hopefully the camera is focused on that enough you can see that. Transmission's doing all right. It's staying under 210 and the coolant is staying under 220. So, you know, the air temperature's 72 outside, so it's not a hot day, but it's not a cool day either. It's pretty warm and it's continuing to go up. Should top out around 81 or 82 outside this afternoon. So, I mean, it's a warm day. But the cooling package on these 5th gen Rams is pretty fantastic, and even dragging this trailer around, it's staying pretty cool. Now you can see here on the straight stretches we're running in 5th gear, so it'll go to 6th gear going down the hills, and then, you know, it might sometimes hit 7th, but on the straight stretches we're staying in 5th. On the hills, it'll go down to 4th gear. There was one really bad hill back there where it downshifted all the way to 3rd gear. But generally, it's pulling the hills in 4th, and then 5th and 6th most of the time. So the reason I bring that up is that's pretty much exactly where the EcoDiesel was. And the interesting thing about it is this Hemi truck has the 321 axle gear, and that EcoDiesel I had the 392 axle gear. That truck had about a 34-inch tire on it. This one's got a 35, which kind of measures out pretty close to a 34. It's kind of on the small side for a 35. But anyway, a lot of people wonder, you know, if you got the 321 axle gear, can you put a 35-inch tire on there? And the answer is yes. The truck is completely fine with 35s as far as power goes, and we're even dragging this trailer around and it's doing a fantastic job. I mean, we're in 5th gear right now, kind of going up a small grade. So yeah, truck's doing great. Now there's a little bit of sway. The truck's kind of bobbing around just a little bit. It's not bad, but I can tell that if it was windy out here, which it probably will be on our way back home this weekend, got a storm system coming in, it's going to be windy, I probably will need to go ahead and put the sway control bars on the hitch. So I'll go ahead and hook those up when we head home, but without them on a non-windy day like this, it's doing fine. So yep, no problems at all. In fact, the Hemi, I think overall has more power. Then we talked about that a little while ago, how the EcoDiesel doesn't really give you the whole 480 pound-feet. There's a very specific set of circumstances in which it'll let you have that whole 480 peak pound-feet of torque. The guys at Green Diesel Engineering told us about that. When they dyno test them, they found that it would only do that under certain circumstances, but most of the time you're getting about 440, which is where the Jeep Gladiator EcoDiesel was rated at its peak, is 440. Well, the Rams, even though they can potentially peak at 480, they're actually running about 440 pound-feet most of the time. So point is, they don't have a big torque advantage over the Hemi really, but the Hemi does have a massive horsepower advantage over the EcoDiesel, and you can tell it out here towing. You know, again, we're in 5th. I'm sure it's getting ready to go up to 6th because we're in a straight stretch. Yeah, there it just went to 6th gear, cruising along at 2,000 RPM out here with with a great big wind catching enclosed trailer behind us. So I guess that answers that question. The Hemi has no problem at all doing the work, even with the less desirable 321 axle gear. All right, getting into some traffic, so I'm gonna get off here, and then we'll have some more footage later on from the Blue Holler off-road park. We'll talk to you guys later.